The starting point of any meaningful change in life is found in the mind. The thoughts you entertain every day are not just fleeting ideas or harmless internal chatter. They are building blocks. They are seeds planted in the soil of your subconscious mind, and over time, they shape the very fabric of your reality. Just like an architect doesn't start constructing a building with bricks and cement first, but with a vision, a thought, your life is constructed by the vision you repeatedly hold in your mind. Everything that exists in the physical world began in someone's imagination. The chair you're sitting on, the phone in your hand, the city you live in, the career path you're on, they all began as a single thought in the mind of someone who dared to think. They saw something in their mind that others couldn't see, and they moved toward it. That's the real power of thought. It's not just mental noise, it's creative power. It's an instruction to your body, your habits, and even your surroundings. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you are giving instructions through your thoughts. The question is, are those instructions working for you or against you? When you constantly think of failure, you don't just feel down. You begin to walk differently, talk differently, and make different decisions. And those decisions align with failure, even if you don't want them to. But if you think of progress, growth, and improvement, you walk straighter, speak more confidently, and begin to take action that supports the belief you've chosen to think. That's why successful people aren't just lucky. They're often the ones who have trained their minds to see what others overlook. They spend time imagining what's possible instead of worrying about what could go wrong. The brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined. When you consistently imagine a certain outcome, your nervous system responds as if that outcome is already happening. Your heart rate changes, your energy shifts, your perspective sharpens, all based on a thought. That's why athletes visualize their performance before they compete. That's why entrepreneurs rehearse their pitch before walking into an investor meeting. It's not wishful thinking, it's training the mind to act as if success is already part of them. It's also important to realize that your dominant thoughts attract certain situations and people. Have you ever noticed that when you start thinking about buying a certain car, you suddenly see that car everywhere? It's not that there are more of those cars on the road, it's that your brain is now tuned into them. It's the same with opportunities. If you're thinking about how to grow, how to contribute, how to elevate your life, you begin to notice chances to do just that. But if you're stuck thinking that life is unfair, people can't be trusted, and success is out of reach, then even when opportunity knocks, you won't recognize it. Your thinking won't allow you to. The danger is that most people don't realize how often they're thinking thoughts that don't serve them. They repeat negative statements in their head like a mantra. I'll never get ahead. This always happens to me. I'm not smart enough. Over time, these thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs shape behavior. You won't apply for that job because you've told yourself you're not good enough. You won't save or invest because you've decided you'll always be broke. You won't even try something new because you've already made up your mind that you'll fail. And it all started with a thought, one you didn't question but accepted. But here's the good news. If your thoughts created the problem, they can also create the solution. The moment you take control of your thinking, you take control of your life. This is why it's critical to pause and ask yourself, what am I thinking about most of the time? Are your thoughts rooted in fear or in faith, in limitation or in possibility, in regret or in purpose? Because whatever you dwell on, That's what your life begins to reflect. It's not magic, it's mechanics. Your mind will direct your attention, your behavior, and your decisions in alignment with what you believe. So, the only way to change your life is to first change the internal blueprint. Most people try to change their circumstances by working harder or changing their environment. And while effort and environment do matter, neither of them can override a deeply ingrained belief. You can move to a new city, get a better job, meet new people. But if you're still thinking the same old thoughts, you'll repeat the same patterns. Your results will always match your mindset. Until you shift what's happening in your inner world, you won't see much change in your outer world. Think of your thoughts as instructions to the universe, to your subconscious, to your future. They're not passive. They're active. They are painting the picture of your destiny. So choose them like your life depends on it. Because it does, there's a timeless principle that operates in every area of life. What you focus on expands. That means wherever your attention goes, your energy flows, and whatever you give energy to grows stronger. Most people overlook this because they think focus is just about concentration, but it's much more than that. Focus is the filter through which you experience your life. It determines what you notice, how you interpret events, how you feel, and ultimately what results you create. You can be in the same situation as someone else, but if your focus is different, your outcome will be completely different. Your mind works like a magnifying glass. It takes what you think about and makes it appear larger, closer, and more important. If you constantly focus on problems, your mind will find more problems. If you focus on possibilities, your mind will start scanning your world for ways to create those possibilities. Neither reality is more true than the other. It's just that your focus determines what part of reality you engage with. You could be surrounded by opportunities, but never see them because you're focused on everything that could go wrong. And you could be in the middle of a crisis, but still find a break through because your focus is on how to grow through it. This is why two people can go through the same challenge and come out of it with completely different mindsets. One person becomes bitter and stuck. The other becomes wiser and stronger. The difference isn't the event, it's where each person placed their focus. One focused on what was lost, the other focused on what could be learned, and the result of that focus determined who they became on the other side. You don't get to control every event in your life, but you always get to choose what you focus on, and that choice has the power to shift everything. The world is filled with distractions. Every day there are 1,000 things calling for your attention: news headlines, social media, gossip, complaints, fears, doubts. If you're not intentional, your focus will be hijacked by things that are urgent but not important, loud but not valuable, dramatic but not truthful. And once your focus is hijacked, your energy follows. Suddenly, you're tired, anxious, confused, and wondering why you're not making progress. It's not because you're incapable. It's because your energy has been drained by focusing on things that don't move you forward. You must protect your focus like your future depends on it, because it does. If you constantly focus on what's missing, you'll never feel like you have enough. If you focus on what you can't do, you'll never tap into what you can do. If you focus on what's wrong with people, you'll never build the relationships you need. But if you focus on gratitude, you'll start to feel richer before your bank account changes. If you focus on solutions, you'll become resourceful even when resources are limited. If you focus on growth, you'll see every obstacle as a step forward instead of a setback. Focus also determines how long you stay in a setback. Everyone falls, everyone gets discouraged, everyone hits resistance. That's part of the process. But what keeps some people stuck while others rise? It's what they focus on after they fall. One person keeps replaying the failure, another shifts their focus to what's next. One focuses on the pain, the other focuses on the purpose. You can't avoid every fall, but you can decide what your mind focuses on once you're down. And that decision either prolongs the pain or pulls you out of it. Your focus also influences your habits. What you think about most becomes what you feel compelled to act on. If you're constantly focused on being healthy, you'll start making better food choices, even without forcing yourself. If you focus on discipline, you'll find ways to stay consistent. If you focus on progress, you'll look for wins each day. But if you focus on how hard things are, your motivation disappears. If you focus on what others are doing better than you, you'll start shrinking your own efforts. Your focus feeds your habits, and your habits determine your future. Another important truth about focus is that it's deeply connected to your identity. If you keep focusing on the worst parts of your story, you start to see yourself as someone who is broken or unlucky or stuck. But if you start focusing on your resilience, your creativity, your ability to bounce back, your identity begins to shift. You start seeing yourself as a builder, a fighter, a problem solver. And when your identity shifts, your actions follow. But the shift begins with what you choose to focus on every day, especially when no one else is watching. There's something powerful that happens when you deliberately focus on your goals, even if they seem far away. You start aligning your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior with where you want to go, not where you've been. It's like setting your GPS. Once you focus on a destination, your brain begins working behind the scenes to get you there. It notices the opportunities, it silences the distractions, it redirects your energy. But if you haven't chosen a focus, then you're driving in circles. You're busy, but you're not getting anywhere. Clarity begins with focus, and progress is impossible without it. Focus is a muscle. It gets stronger when you train it. That means the more you practice choosing your focus, the easier it becomes to tune out the noise. You start noticing your patterns. You start recognizing when your focus is pulling you backward. And most importantly, you begin to develop the power to shift it. You realize you're not at the mercy of your emotions, your environment, or your past. You have the power to change your focus, and in doing so, you change the trajectory of your life. There's a reason why the same thoughts repeated over time can change a person's life. Not because of magic, but because repetition builds identity. What you think repeatedly doesn't just influence what you do. It becomes who you are, and who you are determines what you're capable of achieving. That's why casual thoughts are never really casual. If repeated enough, even the smallest idea can turn into a lifelong belief. It's the repetition of thoughts that wires your self-image, and your self-image controls everything: your actions, your decisions, your behavior, and your results. Most people think identity is fixed. They believe they were born shy, unlucky, or not good with money. But the truth is, very few beliefs are permanent. They were just thoughts that got repeated so many times that they became automatic. Someone told them they weren't smart enough, and they replayed that thought so many times that it became a part of how they see themselves. They failed at something once, and they kept revisiting that failure mentally until they decided, I'm not cut out for this. It wasn't the failure that shaped them. It was the repeated thought about the failure that created the shift in identity. And here's the key. Repetition works both ways. It can build limitation or it can build strength. Just like the mind absorbs negative thoughts, it can also be trained to absorb empowering ones. The same way you can teach yourself to believe you're not worthy, you can also teach yourself to believe that you're capable, deserving, focused, and strong. The mind doesn't reject repetition, it welcomes it. That's why affirmations work, why visualization works, and why practicing gratitude works. Because over time, the thoughts you choose to repeat start to feel familiar, and what feels familiar becomes accepted. If someone calls you disciplined one time, you might brush it off. But if you start telling yourself every morning, I am disciplined, I finish what I start, I follow through, and you repeat it long enough, your brain starts looking for evidence. You start acting in line with that thought. And soon, you don't just say it, you believe it. You don't just believe it, you live it. That's the power of repetition. It starts as an idea, becomes a habit of thought, and ends up shaping who you are. Repetition builds more than belief, it builds emotional association. If you constantly repeat thoughts of fear, you'll feel anxious even in safe situations. If you constantly repeat thoughts of failure, you'll feel unworthy even in moments of success. On the other hand, if you repeat thoughts of strength, you'll feel confident in challenges. If you repeat thoughts of value, you'll feel worthy in any room. That emotional association becomes part of your default response. That's why some people walk into an opportunity and feel ready, while others shrink away. It's not about talent, it's about what they've rehearsed in their mind over and over again. Your habits are tied to this as well. A person doesn't build the habit of discipline by accident. It starts with a thought like, let me just show up today. Then they repeat it. Day after day, that repetition becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes a behavior, and the behavior builds the identity of a disciplined person. The same goes for someone who wants to build confidence. They start with a simple, repeated act, making eye contact, speaking clearly, finishing tasks. Repetition is what locks it in, because when you do something often enough, your brain stops questioning it. It becomes part of the program. Repetition doesn't only happen consciously. Most of it is unconscious. You repeat certain complaints, excuses, fears, or regrets without even noticing. That's why it's so important to bring awareness to your inner dialogue. Because if you're not choosing what to repeat, your mind will just play the same old tape it's always played. And that tape may have been recorded by your past, by people who didn't believe in you, or by moments of pain you never rewrote. Repetition gives those thoughts power unless you interrupt them and choose a new thought to repeat instead. What you hear often enough, you start to believe. That's true when other people say it, and it's even more true when you say it to yourself. The difference between someone who rises and someone who stays stuck is not just what they know, it's what they repeatedly tell themselves. One person says, I can't do this. Every time it gets hard, the other says, I've handled worse, I'll figure it out. Even when they feel uncertain. That repeated thought builds emotional resilience. Over time, it becomes a steady foundation they can rely on. You'll never outperform the identity you've built through repetition. If your repeated thought is, I always mess things up, you'll subconsciously act in a way that proves it right. If your repeated thought is, "I learn from everything," you'll keep evolving no matter how many mistakes you make. That's the difference between someone who grows and someone who quits. Repetition isn't just about motivation, it's about identity construction. And once your identity shifts, you don't need constant willpower. You act according to who you believe you are. You don't have to force it. It becomes automatic. Your mind is your most valuable real estate, and what you allow inside determines everything that grows or dies within it. Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you're allowing ideas, opinions, emotions, and beliefs to walk right through the gates of your mind. Some of them help you grow. Others slowly poison your confidence, your peace, and your direction. The problem is, most people are not guarding that gate. They've left it wide open. They're not filtering what's being allowed in, and because of that, their internal environment is being shaped by the noise of the world rather than the clarity of their purpose. When you leave the front door of your house wide open, anybody can walk in. You wouldn't leave your house open for a thief or a stray animal. Yet many people leave their minds completely open to toxic thinking, negative opinions, false beliefs, and fear-based programming. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't feel like an invasion. It feels normal. It feels like scrolling through social media, watching the news, hearing someone else's opinion, or repeating something you heard 10 years ago. The damage is subtle, but over time, these unchecked ideas settle in and start running your life from the inside out. Your thoughts aren't formed in isolation. They're the result of input, what you read, what you hear, what you allow around you. If you consume fear all day, you'll live fearfully. If you listen to people who always complain, your thinking will start to reflect those complaints. If you're constantly exposed to doubt, laziness, or hopelessness, you'll start to absorb those ideas, even if you don't mean to. The mind works through repetition and association. So when you surround yourself with toxic input, your mind starts associating those ideas as normal. What was once outrageous becomes familiar. And once it feels familiar, it's easier to believe it's true. That's why it's so important to become intentional about what you expose your mind to. If your mind is your garden, then the words you hear, the ideas you entertain, and the voices you allow in are either planting seeds of strength or sowing weeds of doubt. You don't just randomly end up thinking negative thoughts. Those thoughts were planted by something, a past experience, a careless word from someone you trusted, a belief you never challenged. If you don't uproot those weeds and replace them with something better, they will keep multiplying. And before long, you'll be living in a mindset that you didn't consciously build. Guarding your mind doesn't mean shutting out the world. It means filtering the world. It means becoming selective about the voices you listen to, the messages you accept, and the beliefs you allow to take root. Just like you wouldn't let someone track mud into your home, you have to stop letting damaging thoughts walk into your mental space uninvited. If someone constantly brings drama, doubt, or distraction into your life, their words will echo in your mind long after they're gone. If you watch media that feeds your fear and lowers your standard, it will keep influencing you even when you think you're unaffected. You become what you consistently think about, and you think based on what you repeatedly allow in. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being proactive. Because once a negative thought takes root, it doesn't stay quiet. It spreads. It starts questioning your ability, your worth, your goals. It says things like, "Why bother? Who do you think you are? This is just the way life is. And those thoughts, if left unchecked, become the internal script you live by. You'll stop reaching for more not because you aren't capable, but because you've accepted a belief you didn't challenge. Most people don't realize how much influence they've given to the outside world. They let strangers online dictate how they feel about themselves. They let a single piece of bad news rob them of their motivation. They let someone's criticism 5 years ago decide their confidence today. This is what happens when you don't guard the gates. You start living someone else's version of your life, shaped by thoughts that were never yours to begin with. You might be carrying a belief that came from a teacher who gave up on you, a friend who envied you, or a family member who was afraid. And because it entered your mind unchecked, it grew into something that now feels real. To guard your mind is to take ownership of your internal world. It means you choose the input with intention. You spend time feeding your thoughts with material that uplifts, educates, and empowers. You choose relationships that speak life into your potential. You challenge beliefs that feel limiting or fear-based. You recognize when a thought doesn't belong and you replace it with a better one. You stop waiting for the world to build you up, and instead you start building yourself from the inside out. The most successful people aren't the ones who avoid all negativity. They're the ones who don't give negativity permission to settle in their minds. They've trained themselves to question the story they're telling, to recognize when a thought is based on fear rather than truth, and to replace reactive thinking with intentional thinking. They know that if they don't protect their mental environment, it doesn't matter how much talent, education, or opportunity they have, because a polluted mind will always limit a powerful life. They treat their thoughts like investments, because they know the compound effect of what you think every day eventually becomes what you live every day. Most people are not limited by their abilities, their background, or even their circumstances. They're limited by the size of their thinking. The boundaries they've drawn in their mind become the same boundaries they experience in real life. If your thoughts are small, your actions will be small. And if your actions are small, your results will be small. It's not that life is withholding greatness from you. It's that most people have never learned how to think beyond what they already see, already know, or already believe they can do. Big thinking isn't just about having dreams. It's about expanding your mental framework to include the possibility of those dreams becoming real. It's about seeing yourself as someone capable of more, worthy of more, and responsible for creating more. When you think bigger, you stop waiting for someone else to unlock the next level of your life. You realize it's your thoughts that either keep the door locked or swing it wide open. The moment you expand your thinking, you open the door to new actions, new decisions, and new levels of confidence. Small thinking is sneaky. It doesn't show up as I'm thinking small. It shows up as perfectionism, procrastination, playing it safe, doubting your value, or assuming you're not ready. It shows up as clinging to what's familiar, even when what's familiar isn't working. It shows up when you talk yourself out of applying for a better position, launching a new idea, or investing in yourself because you've convinced yourself the timing has to be perfect. But big thinkers don't wait for perfect conditions. They create momentum with imperfect beginnings. They understand that thinking big is a habit, not an event. It's a mindset that gets reinforced every time you choose courage over comfort. Your thoughts are like a thermostat. If you keep the dial set to average, even when opportunities for growth arrive, you'll subconsciously find ways to cool things down. You'll shrink the vision, delay the action, or sabotage the result just to stay within your mental comfort zone. But if you raise the dial, if you expand your thinking to match where you want to go, your internal environment begins to heat up. You feel more energy, you take different steps, you begin to operate at a new level. Thinking bigger changes not just what you do, but who you are becoming in the process. One of the greatest reasons people stay stuck is because they only think as far as their current resources. They say things like, "I can't do that, I don't have the money," or "I'm not qualified for that," or "people like me don't get those opportunities." They let their present situation dictate the size of their vision, but big thinkers reverse that. They let the size of their vision dictate their resourcefulness. They ask bigger questions. They challenge assumptions. They look for ways around the obstacle instead of stopping at it. They don't ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "How can I afford this?" That shift in thinking creates movement. And movement creates clarity. There's something magnetic about big thinking. It attracts ideas, people, and resources that wouldn't show up for small dreams. When you think bigger, you speak differently. You carry yourself with more conviction. You set higher standards. And people respond to that energy. The world rarely gives you more than you ask of it. And if your thinking never asks for more growth, more meaning, more contribution, then your life settles into the size of your thoughts. But when you expand that thinking, everything else begins to stretch with it. Your relationships grow. Your opportunities multiply. Your capacity deepens. And you begin to see the ripple effect of one mental shift, leading to massive real-world change. Big thinking also demands big responsibility. When you allow yourself to dream bigger, you can't afford to stay in old habits. You can't keep wasting time, staying around people who drain your vision, or tolerating patterns that don't align with your future. You start treating your time, energy, and focus as valuable assets, because now you have somewhere meaningful to go. You're not just living to get through the day, you're building something. You're creating a life that reflects the size of your belief. And that shift starts with deciding that the thoughts you think matter enough to monitor, to upgrade, and to expand. What you allow in your imagination becomes the blueprint for your next reality. If you only allow yourself to imagine surviving, then you'll organize your life around survival. But if you begin to imagine thriving, contributing, building, and impacting, your behavior starts to follow that image. You begin to speak in alignment with it, make decisions based on it, and attract people who can help bring it to life. Thinking bigger is not about arrogance or fantasy. It's about rising above the noise of fear and average and recognizing that you were meant for more than settling. Most people don't aim high and miss. They aim too low and hit every time. That's why thinking bigger is one of the most practical strategies you can use to break through your limitations and finally create the life you know deep down you're capable of living. Your life will always rise or fall to meet the level of your dominant thoughts. The world you experience on the outside is shaped by the ideas, beliefs, and focus you nurture on the inside. If you want to change your life, you must first change what you think about most. Your thoughts are the starting line of every result, every breakthrough, every transformation. They are the unseen force guiding your words, your actions, your choices, and ultimately your destiny. When you begin to understand that thoughts are not random, that they are instructions to your mind, blueprints for your identity, and triggers for your habits, you start living with a higher level of awareness. You stop entertaining ideas that shrink your life, and you begin to choose thoughts that expand it. You become intentional about what you allow into your mind, what you rehearse every day, and what you give energy to. You learn to guard your mental environment like your future depends on it, because it does. As you repeat better thoughts, you build a stronger identity. As you focus on growth and opportunity, your life starts revealing more of both. And as you stretch your thinking beyond what's comfortable or familiar, you unlock levels of purpose, creativity, and power that you may have never believed were available to you. This is not about wishing or waiting. It's about mastering your mind so that it becomes your greatest ally, not your worst enemy. You become what you think about, so think with clarity, think with conviction, think with intention, because your thoughts are not just reflections of your reality. They are the architects of it.